Second part of color theory. We're going to be working on the secondary colors. But what we're going to work on here also is we're going to show you a little bit about painting back here. You can't get into primary colors without having to talk a bit about painting. So let's take a look at what we're getting ready for. We're going to do some setup, and actually some of the stuff you're going to see here is going to help you being able to mix your colors, work with colors, and do some of those things. So we're going to take a look at how they're working and what they're working with. The concept about painting, and I know we didn't say we're going to do much about painting, but you can't help but get into painting when you're talking about color theory, is that most people who I know will be thinking about painting and thinking, unless I can't paint like Cezanne, or well, Cezanne's not a good example, I would say Caravaggio or the Renaissance, or even like photorealism like Ken Marshall. Oh, I'm not an artist. That is so not true. What about Picasso? That's the number one artist that we think about. What about Cezanne? Now I can bring him in. Or Paul Gauguin. Then there's Paul Klee, who paints with just feeling and emotion. Yeah, I'll give you an example. I'm going to ask you a question. Obviously, you can't answer that, but it's hypothetical. Do you love your parents, or do you love your spouse or your children? And your answer is most likely to be yes. But then the next question is, prove it. Put it on canvas, prove it. That becomes a bit of a challenge. All right, so let's go inside and take a look and see what we got on this episode of Artifacts. Come on. HumanKind's financial department had their annual team building workshop. And yours truly was hired to have a workshop in arts. Take a look at some of these works. If you notice, a lot of these people are analytical, and usually an analytical person doesn't create. Now this one here, I'm very fond of, because this is my beautiful bride's painting. But look at the paintings. They all used the three basic primary colors and the three secondary colors, plus white. Just that. Now look closely. There's no black in any of these. None of them are using black. They're mixing their own black. When you look at them individually, they look really, really nice. But put them together in a group, and they look even more stunning. Put them in a frame, and then put them in an atmosphere where those paintings should be hung, they're going to look stellar. They're good enough to be a Christmas card. But understanding color allows you to get this kind of work, being loose and free, and not trying to copy exactly what the reference is like, but to be yourself. This is what color theory does. This is what it's all about. And working together and being able to get these colors to work for you and to be able to mix and be free with these colors. Now in this episode, we are going to be talking about the secondary colors, purple, orange, and green. Mixing all of these colors here, once you understand these 6 colors, you will be able to expand your horizons. And you're going to be able to do a lot more. So let's go downstairs. Let's go take a look at the color chart and see what we can come up with so you can have a better understanding about these colors. And we'll even mix some of the bad colors so that you have an idea of knowing using the right blues, yellows, and reds will get you where you want to be. All right. Let's head on downstairs and a little more exciting with this.
It's a pretty color. What is that?
That purple, the other purple, the other purple, that purple.
Somewhere that's green.
Like an orange that you eat. Like the one with the peel. Not the...
Watching television in color.
Color? No kidding.
Yeah, I think we have complementary strengths.
Speedway Squad, in color.
Ah, the wondrous color wheel. You know, there is a certain art to this. I have seen others make beautiful designs from it. Lights, shadows, tints, values, and designs out of it. And just the idea of color is all an art in itself, too. I mean, there's a lot to be said about it. When you understand color and you're able to utilize color, you can use something as beautiful as the color wheel, just like this, to create some dynamic designs. Okay, well, let's move on. Last episode, we talked about what? The primary colors. And primary colors as a review are what? Primary because they're like prime numbers. That's as low as you can go. They are the base of all color on the spectrum of the rainbow. And you can't mix these colors, so that's what we've learned from those. Okay, so let's move on to the next step. And that next step is going to be our secondary colors. And let's refer over to the color wheel. And remember where I pulled in the primary colors? Let's take a look at this, and let's pull out the secondary colors. Voila! Secondary colors. They are orange, green, and purple. And why are they called secondary colors? Well, secondary colors, they are the second series of colors. Hence the case, secondary. And they're basically used, they are made from two different colors. Now, whenever you're trying to create a color, such as orange, you're going to have to know that you're going to need red and yellow to create that orange. For purple, it's going to be red, blue. And of course for green, yellow, blue. And you can see with those colors, you can, again, theoretically, make any color you need. And now I keep using that word theoretically because although we see these colors, and I say theoretically, you can get any color in the rainbow or any color you can, there's other things that come into play. For instance, the vehicle in the pigment and the paint. Now I know what's vehicle. Well, it's the stratus that carries the color. We'll get into that later. But anyway, such as latex is going to be different than acrylic different than watercolor. So each one of these are going to have a slight different problem to that. If we could get every single color out of just those three colors, the exact color, we wouldn't have a vast array of colors to choose from when we go out to get bicolors. As a matter of fact, the more you can use these colors, I'd even recommend that. Use a vast array of these colors. But don't use them what I call raw, meaning going directly from the tube. You're going to want to bring in some other colors in there, which is going to make your painting more dynamic. This is where color theory starts to get a little complicated and how to match that. Now, where it really gets complicated is when you're trying to really push a color back but keep that color and still make it look sharp in the background. It becomes and not flat. It becomes rather challenging, and it takes practice. It takes years of practice, and really, even the masters will tell you, I don't have a grasp of that. I've been doing this for 55 years, and I still get frustrated to matching and looking at these colors. When I step back, I go, it's not exactly what I wanted. But that's the whole magic of color theory. It's not what you think it is. It's temperamental. So take your time on this. If you're just starting on this, don't expect to get this like right off the bat. Now, in using these colors, when you start using those, if you start mixing a few colors here and there and you start getting these colors together, you can start moving your palette further and wider. If you can start mixing these colors and creating a vast array of colors, it's going to be easier for you to be able to, for instance, pick up a burnt sienna or pick up a burnt umber or raw sienna and use that brown. These are the browns that you're going to use and utilize those in your works. You can use they used to call Hooker's brown, and Hooker's green, which is a wonderful green, and be able to mold it and shape it and turn it and push it by using other colors and neutralizing these colors. Okay, so what do I mean by neutralizing colors? Okay, let's take a look at this chart right here. You'll see the 3 bars here I have here: blue, yellow, red. Now, as they fade, they're going to fade into their opposite complementary color, and I'm going to stop it here. Look, they become neutralized. When you take a color opposite of the color wheel, this is what it looks like. So, what does that mean, opposite to the color wheel? Let me show you. Take that away. There we go. And now, let's bring back the color wheel. All right, so now we have the color wheel. Now, if you're looking at, take any color. Just take any one of the primary colors that I have pulled up here. Now go to the opposite end of that color wheel, the opposite color. That's the complementary color to the color you just chose. So if I'm looking at the green, if I go opposite, red is the complementary color. Very appropriate, being that we're coming upon Christmas. Those two are probably the easiest to remember, because when you get green and red, you think of Christmas colors. Well, those are the complementary colors. Okay, hang in here with me. With the colors opposite to each other, this is how you neutralize. Now, to get a really good brown, if you have a really good green and a really good red and you mix those together, you get a dynamic brown. It looks really, really well. And that's why we go back to saying brown technically is not a color. It's a neutral. So it's not a color. It's something that's mixed. The only way you get a true brown is by mixing those colors. Now, if you throw a third color into that, you're going to get it with black. That's why if you end up with your 3 primary colors or even 3 secondary colors and you mix them evenly, you're going to end up with black. Now, keep this in mind. In nature, there is no such thing as absolute black. There isn't. In fact, my hair, it's not black. If you were to grind it down, it would turn red. Each of these colors, or I should say, black has these colors all mixed in. So there's really no such thing. Anything that's black is man-made. The chair, handles, car, paint, but they all have a certain pigment to them, and it's artificial. But in nature, no black. I'll challenge you. Study of nature. Go out onto a tree, anything like that, and really look for black. You won't find it. The street, not black. It's more of a bluish, purplish color. And you start pulling into those colors and you start realizing it's not genuinely black. If you start looking at that, you'll start using less and less black, which is good. You don't want to just rely on black to create those dark areas. I like to use this analogy. For instance, think of black as a basement and white as an attic in a house. If you have a basement, can you go any lower than that? No, you're stuck there. Can you go any higher than the attic? Nope, you can't. Same thing, black, white. You can't go any lower or higher. So if you're going to start off with white with a light, you can't go any lighter than that. If you're going to do a shadow with it black, you can't go any darker. So utilizing and mixing your black and then using black out of the tube just for those little pops of dark, same thing with the white, using pigment in the white and then adding a touch of that white is going to really make things look a lot different, and it's going to make your work pop. So think of those two as just an aid to create the absolute essence or push to the end of your work. That's basically what you want to do. Okay, so now we're looking at these complementary colors. So let's take it a step further, and now let's talk about split complementary. Huh? Right. What's a split complementary? Okay, well, you chose the color that you looking at, okay? Choose another color, any color on the color wheel. Go to the opposite of that color. I don't care. It doesn't even have to be the primary or secondary color. Just choose one of those colors. Once you choose one of those colors, go the opposite. Now, go slightly to the left, go slightly to the right. That's your split complementary color. Now, what is so important about using a split complementary color? It helps you to push a color, but then turn it a bit. If you're trying to neutralize it, but you don't want to go full neutral on that, you can turn it in a slight different direction, which will help you either lighten or darken or push the color in several different directions. That'll allow you to be able to take more control of that color. It'll allow you to neutralize it or to bring it up. Now, here's the other thing. Once you've crossed over into the complementary or split complementary, you can now take your white and lighten that tone. You can lighten that color and bring it out, or you can take your black and push it down. But once you're able to mix black, again, you can't mix white, but you can mix your black. You can take your black mixture and then add that to your split complementary color and then push that color back. And you still haven't used your black. Have I lost you? I hope not. But you can see how color starts to get more complicated and how it works and what we're doing and all that other good stuff. Yeah.
What did he just say?
Does anyone else know about this?
Does anyone know what he means?
Does anybody know why? Anyone?
With me talking about it and showing to you here, it's important to at least get an understanding of what you're looking at as far as color is concerned. And then what you can do is turn around and practice with these colors, and it will help you in what you're working with painting. Now, we're going to demonstrate this, and I'm going to demonstrate how these colors work. But what we're going to do first, which we didn't do last episode, is we're going to take, remember, if you saw the last episode, remember the light blue and the yellow and the red, which was kind of like an orange. I'm going to mix those for you so you can see just how bad, if you start off with a bad start, your colors are not going to come out the way you want them to come out. So hence, it's extremely important that you're able to utilize the right mixtures of colors. Now, here's another thing you may want to remember. Look at the complementary here. Let's take the blue, for instance. And we go opposite to that. That opposite to blue is going to be yellow. Now, here is the thing that you can remember. It's not yellow, orange. Here's the thing you can remember. It's an easier way to remember. When you're trying to figure out, and you don't have a color wheel in front of you, and you're trying to figure out what the complementary color is, remember these two rules. Whatever color you've chosen, for instance, remember the mistake I just made? I said that the complementary color to blue was yellow. Well, that was wrong. Because there's two things you have to remember. A, the color opposite to blue has to be warm. And the second thing is it has to be a secondary color. So, as you can see, because I was trying to talk and chew gum at the same time.
What is this? What is going on?
He's crazy! We gotta stop him! He made a mistake.
Come on, Eli. Give him a break.
I came out and I told you that yellow was the opposite. It's not. It's a split complementary color. So, it's a secondary color. So, that opposite to that is going to be orange. Okay? Kind of like the Denver Broncos.
Go Broncos, go!
Last time I saw you, you were a Denver Broncos cheerleader.
Just all Broncos.
Those are complementary colors. So what you're going to do is you're going to remember, okay, if I have orange, or let's go with orange. If I have orange, it's a secondary color. So it's going to be a primary color, and it's going to be a cool color. That's the second thing to remember. If it's a cool color that you're going to use, it's always going to be a warm color. You'll never have a cool color to a complement. You'll never have a primary or a secondary. It will always be opposite to each other. That's the best way to remember it. Hey, and if you can't quite remember exactly, even if you take, let's say, yellow and you go, okay, it's a cool color, take a cool color and it's a secondary color, you're going to go purple. It is. You wouldn't go red because that's considered a warm color. Okay, so you're not going to be able to utilize those as a complementary color in your color wheel. So that's the best way to remember it. It has to be a cool, and it has to be opposite to either primary or opposite to a secondary. Okay, when you add a little bit of color, it neutralizes that. The primary color or the secondary color that you're using on that, it will neutralize, but you can slightly push it in certain directions, left, right, cooler, warmer, and whatnot. And you can bend those colors and start working with them. And they become more realistic when you start playing with those and you start adding and then start pulling in other colors that you're working with. And we're going to demonstrate that. I will also demonstrate that in painting. Now, remember on the last episode, I showed you those paintings that were done by the students. Well, I shouldn't say students, that they're technically students, but anyway, the ones that were working at HumanKind. And you saw those paintings. You could see they were very loose and very free, and they were just using the reference as something to follow by. But I was showing them and introducing them to primary and secondary colors and how to mix those colors and create the darks and shadows. And then it wasn't until the last 15 minutes that they could use the black. And the black was just enough to pop those colors back and forth, to push them back, to create those shadows and darks. And, and that's what we're working in painting. Now, last episode I talked about cyan, yellow, magenta, and black. And that's in printing. Keep that in mind because we're going to kind of go into that probably in next episode about printing. We'll talk more about that. But in the next episode, we're going to be utilizing how these colors are used and how we end up working these colors and creating different colors and trying to push them back and forth. So that's about printing. It's good to know about it because if you start getting into the arts, you have to have a little understanding about how printing works and how things are put together for your enjoyment. Yeah.
What's so funny?
Funny. How supremely, wonderfully funny.
What's so funny?
That is funny.
No, to be honest, I don't get it. I really don't.
Oh boy. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy.
Okay. So, color wheel, complementary colors, which are your secondary colors, your primary colors. Mixed together, you're going to get black. Going across with using just the complementary and secondary colors, you're going to get brown. And you can push that around a little bit. On this episode, what we're going to do is we're going to mix the bad colors so you can see what it's going to be like. And we're going to mix secondary colors, primary colors, and you're going to see how they work together. And that's getting an understanding of how these colors work and what we're going to do and how they're going to work together. You'll also see that in these paintings, to be able to get these colors are not as easy as they seem. Remember, once you've mastered acrylic, or I wouldn't even choose that word master, once you understand acrylic and you're able to use that, it's not going to apply the same thing as it would to oils. And once you understand oils, it's not going to apply the same as to latex. A lot of these other colors are flat. They tend to dull out, or they just think of it as a cake coming out of the oven. Yes, I use a lot of analogies. That's just me. You take it out too soon and it goes flat. Changes from heat. Another one is if you take work out of a kiln, pull it out too fast, they break. Well, sometimes in colors, that's the way they work. They just don't come out the way you want them to come out. And that can be frustrating. So it's not always going to work when you neutralize or you try to get a color and try to get it and thinking you're going to get it to pop or really brighten up. The latex is really hard to work with. Trust me, I work on sets with that. And sometimes you have to utilize a different color in order to be able to create the color you're trying to get. Again, this is why color theory is so complicated. But understanding the first 6 colors, the primaries and secondaries, and then learning how to push and pull those colors will inevitably help you to be able to bring in other colors and then work those out as well. And you'll be able to mix, match, and put these colors together and work them. And here's the other thing. You can also tell when a painting is utilizing just raw color. Yeah, you can see that, and you will end up seeing that they didn't understand how to work in neutralizing colors and pushing the backgrounds. Now, when you get into digital art, whole different ballgame altogether. Completely. Because here's the thing. When you work in digital art, You can now take your colored eye or your colored eye and move it to that color, and it will replicate that color. You don't have to deal with having to mix and match and deal with it. It does it for you. Before you get into that, I would highly recommend is to understand what you're doing here in color theory before you go to digital arts. There's a lot of pros and cons in working with digital art. You get to do a lot of things that you can work with, but there's also some things you should know and understand about color and how to utilize painting and working with it before you get into digital art. But again, that's my own suggestion if you really want to expand your art horizons. Okay, so we've done a lot of talking here about all of this. What we're going to do now is we're going to head over to the studio. We're going to take these six colors here. See how I have bad colors here? There's 3 blues, 3 reds, 3 oranges, yellows. And they're all not the same. Well, some of them are good, some of them are bad, and we're going to utilize some of them, and we're going to show you if you don't have a strong base, you're not going to have a good color palette to work with. And again, I said, if that's what you're looking for, then great. You might be looking for that, but it's best to understand how to get good color. Then you can turn around and get the bad color later when you're trying to get that. Okay? All right. So, shall we head over to the studio?
Yeah.
Well, if I guess the T-Rex says go, I guess we should go. So let's head over. As you can see, the colors in the jar, they're a little somewhat inferior as to the acrylics that are standing behind them. So what makes them much better? Well, a lot of it has to do, as I said earlier, the vehicle, the pigment, how they're mixed. That has a big process in how that's all done. Okay, so let's start off on the second part. This part we talked about was the secondary colors, but we also are going to be showing you, or I'm going to be showing you a little bit about how it is important to use the right colors, the right type of paint that you're going to be using, the grade that you're going to be using. If you're using a student grade, they're not going to come out. The colors aren't going to be as brilliant or as bright. If you choose the wrong blue, the wrong yellows or reds, your secondaries are not going to come out. Now, you remember last week we did this here, or I did this to show you how the colors work. Now, look how bright they are. I mean, you have these deep blues, these deep purples and reds, and they really stand out, and it gives you a chance to really push and pull those colors and gives you a chance to work and lighten up and push the colors darker. Let's flip this over and take a look at the more inferior colors. Now, I did these here for time purposes because we have a lot to cover on this episode, and we want to make sure I get everything for you on what we're going to be doing, because we're going to start working on neutralizing colors on the next episode and how to neutralize those and how to work on painting these colors and getting them where we applicate them in our works. Look at this blue. It's very light, and we're limited to what we're working with here. On top of that, it doesn't mix very well either. The purple is pretty decent, but we can only go so dark with that. Whereas if we try to pull it any darker, we're going to have to use black. And you really want to stay away from that. You want to mix those colors. So why is that important? Well, it's important because as an artist, it gives you more knowledge on how to push and pull color. It gives you an established idea of what colors are like. And it makes your work look a lot more legitimate, knowledgeable, whatever the case might be. And now, what we're going to do now is I'm going to show you how these complementary colors work with each other and how you neutralize colors and how you get them to work and how you manipulate these colors and work with them. Now look at this red here, for instance, and this is the more inferior. It's pretty close to this orange here. Now when I mix this orange, I use a massive amount of yellow and very little red. The thing is, you're going to have to use a lot of paint in order to create those colors. And on top of that, they become rather translucent, meaning you're not going to get a deep, rich color from these inferior colors. And then on top of that, there's another area called color fastness. Now, color fastness, we're getting into painting, but this all has to do with color theory, deals with the fading of the color itself. These colors here, if ultraviolet light hits them, or any kind of light, within time, these reds start to fade out. Case in point, if you've ever seen a 4-color process print, it's pretty much dying out now that we use printing in computers, but nevertheless, if you see that, you'll see that the reds die out. They're the first colors to wash out, and you end up with these yellows and greens and cyans and blues because that color fastness starts to fade out. That's the same thing that happens in painting. If you use an inferior color, you're going to fade out, and those colors are going to fade and they're going to die out. Whereas your more expensive colors, they're going to have a better color fastness. They're going to last longer, years and centuries. Not that would be around, but if you want those paintings to hang on, or you want them to last for a while, you're going to have to go to the more upper level paints. Okay, let's take a look at how we mix these colors. We're going to move this out of the way and set this down. Got some of that. And the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to show you the good colors. Yeah, these colors here are complementary to each other. I have purple and yellow, red, green, blue, orange. Now, when we make these into a complementary color, what happens is we get a neutral color, which is brown. Here are the browns. When you mix these two colors up, you get that brown. Hence the reason why it's not on the color wheel. If you look at these browns, you'll see that each brown is slightly different. Now, you may not be able to get those browns on what you're looking at on the screen, because here's the other thing about color theory. They tend to change, and they will change on the surface, they will change in pigment, they will change in different style, and they'll change even on television, which you're watching me now. Because what you're seeing now is you're actually seeing light coming behind and through. These colors here, if you're in person, are actually shining down and bouncing off. So it's going to be a different format altogether. You're going to have something completely different. So what you're seeing is slightly different as compared to what I'm seeing here. And this is the reason why you would need to practice working with color theory. The reason why you would need to be working with these colors so that you can get a hands-on experience on how they work. Okay, let's move a little further. Notice that each one of these are a neutral brown. Notice that this tends to be a little more tan, this tends to be a little more red, and of course you have a little more blue. This tends to be more of a, if we go into the siennas, you have what you call an umbers. You have a raw umber, a burnt umber, and then a raw sienna, and they have more of of browns to them. Now, when I add a tint, they really lighten up. Now, you're probably looking at them and saying, yeah, you're seeing some reds and here's some oranges and there's some yellow. Well, that's exactly how the browns work. They carry those colors. That's their base. Now, if we add a third color, which I've done here, in this case we have purple and we have yellow. If we add the third color, which is green, we end up getting black. Here we have red and we have green. If I turn around and add yellow, I get black. Here, if I add blue, and I have blue and I have orange, and I add the purple, I'm going to get black. Yes, these are all blacks. Now, they're slightly different. And they're not a true black, as you would see, like pitch black. But these here are the blacks that are natural in nature. And that's what these are all laid out for. If I add a tint, I'm going to get a gray. Now, you're probably looking at me and saying, Professor, those aren't grays. Oh, yes, they are. Although this is a yellow tint, this has a green tint, and this has a purple tint, these are grays. Now, watch this. As we bring in the grayscale. Huh? See this grayscale here? Look at those colors. They're not a true gray. You'll see some greens, you'll see some yellows, and you'll see some purples. You have to train your eye. And this is where color theory is starting to get more and more complicated. It's becoming more difficult. Like in music, when you hear a pitch or a tone and a trained musician can hear a certain thing, but other people go, they sound identical, and they'll go, A person who has perfect pitch will be able to hear that. Same thing with color, as you see here on these grayscale. Okay? They're gray, but sitting side by side, you see different colors coming out of those. You see them starting to come out, and they're starting to work on those. Now, here is where it gets even a little more complicated. I had a student one time tell me, Professor, every time I mix color, I always end up with brown. Okay? Point taken. Well, now, here is where it gets even tougher. If you're mixing colors and you're trying to get a certain color, the reason you're getting browns is because you are mixing almost a 50% of each color. You're also not using a tint or a shade. Remember, if you're adding a tint that's going to lighten that color, it's going to help you read that. So if you're trying to neutralize this green, you're putting too much red. If you're trying to neutralize the yellow, you're putting too much purple, which is going to give you this brown. Think of it this way, for those of you who drive. And for those of you who don't, young kids, watch your parents. I'll challenge you this, and I'll use this analogy. Once again, analogies. Your parents or you are driving down a straight road. You have both hands on the wheel. Ask yourself this. When that person is driving, do they keep their hands straight and steady and keep their car going straight? Well, of course not. Because if they do that, the car will eventually drift either left to right, and you'll end up off the side of the road. You have to do course corrections every so often as you're steering, hence the reason you see these slight little turns, left and right. Same thing in color here. You add a light amount or a small amount of color, and you start building that color and adjusting accordingly. A little more color here, a little less color there. And you start building on that. That's how you start getting your neutralization of your color. If you need to lighten that with the tint, then you start adding the white, and it starts pushing it out in one direction. Usually what happens is you get too much. Here's another analogy. As a paddler in sprint Olympic kayaking, there are three classes in kayaking. There's the K1, meaning the single man kayak, the K2, and the K4. And out of those, the hardest boat to steer is the K4. Why? Well, think of it this way. You have 4 men in that boat. All probably weigh a minimum of 200 pounds of solid muscle. When you add all that together, like I said, minimum, you're almost talking about a half a ton of weight in that boat. When you're moving at a force, now remember, a full-on K4 has enough power, 4-man kayak, to tow a small skier. So that's a lot of movement going forward. Here's the thing that I'm getting at. A paddler will feel the boat move slightly, and as soon as they start to feel it, they kick the rudder to the opposite direction to correct course that. A person who is not experienced in paddling, they will turn around and wait till the boat starts to veer over to one side, and then they'll kick the rudder over to one side. By that time, it's too late, and the boat and its inertia and everything moving forward is still moving in that direction, and you're going to go way off course. So you almost have to adjust as you're moving along. I'm using that analogy to show you this here. If you're using a lot of color and you have 50% and you end up with brown, well, the problem here is when you start adding more color, less color, however the case might be, you have already used so much color on this that you can't veer back. You have to take some of that color away and then add to that. See what I'm saying? So this is what makes color theory so much harder. Now let's add another complication to this. If you're not using the right colors as I have here, let me show you. The colors that we used before, oops, I have that upside down. These are the colors that are inferior. Now, you may not be able to see them very well, but if we take a look at the purple and purple here, the yellow and yellow here, we end up getting a lighter brown as we do here. And now look at this here when we add the tint and the shade. They become almost washed out. You can't dig in and pull those colors out. It's almost near impossible. Look at the difference between the red here and the red here. That's almost an orange. Look at the difference between the green here and the green here. Well, pretty close, but now look at this brown. And now look what happens when we add, this is orange. Terrible looking orange as compared to this. If we turn around, this is black, that almost looks like a burnt umber. And when we turn around and try to fade that, it becomes a tan. Now you're starting to see how colors work. Take a look at this color wheel now, the brown color wheel. Look at it. Can you see the colors coming out of the browns now? Look at that tan color. It's yellow. If you look around the color wheel and study it, just look at it. You can see how it goes from the dark brown all the way to the tan. But you can see those colors coming out. That's the same thing that you're seeing here. But if you're not using a color that is going to work really well, you're going to end up with a bad color and you're not going to be able to have a strong foundation to build up on that. So here's what I would suggest. I would suggest that you take the colors that I told you to buy. Now, if you want, buy some inferior color. And you don't have to buy them in this large tubes as I've showed you here. You can find cheap colors in small little containers. Get the worst colors you can and test this. Go out there. I challenge you, really. Go out there and try it out. See how it works. You're not going to get the same brown as you have here. You're going to wrestle with it and you're going to end up getting browns you don't want. You're going to get colors you're not going to get. You're not going to get the blues or all those colors that you're going to really want to pull out in order to help you get to where you're going to go. Not having the right color and not understanding how to mix these colors was going to throw you off completely and you're going to be off to a bad start. But now we start getting into a more complicated area on how to turn and to move these colors in certain directions and how to get them to bend and move and fade back. Now on the next episode, what we're going to do is I'm going to demonstrate. I'm going to use a sky, for instance, and I'm going to introduce Bob Ross onto this, and we're going to start talking about how he uses raw color versus how I'm going to neutralize the sky, neutralize clouds, to make them look more realistic. Now, in the way he teaches, we're getting more into painting here. It's inevitable when you're talking about color theory. The thing about with Bob Ross is that he is showing you a style that he is working with and you're trying to work that style. It's like this. I worked as a personal trainer and I used to have clients ask me, is it better to have a personal trainer or to go by videotape? Well, in actuality, it's better to have a personal trainer. Here's the reason why. If you go by videotape, the person on the videotape is generally giving you an idea how to work. That personal trainer isn't really working with you on your specific needs, because everybody needs to lose weight on certain terms or certain ways that they work out. That's the problem also when everybody's trying to copy what Bob Ross is doing. The thing about that, and it's not just Bob Ross, so please don't think I'm trying to cap on him. It's anybody, including here, right now, where I am. Because there are certain things that I can't look over your shoulder and help you out. It becomes a little more difficult. See where I'm coming from? But what Bob Ross shows you is how to work fast. Now, for some of you out there, that's not the style you really want to work. And what I'm going to show you is several different styles that you can implement into your idea of painting, because there's really no right or wrong way. It's just a style in which you're starting to develop and work with. Okay, so let's take a look at all of these colors here. I want you to practice on working on these colors and seeing how they work and how they work for you and what they're kind of tying all together. This starts to get more complicated as we're starting to work on shades and tints and trying to neutralize and get these colors together. Now that you understand how brown works, try to work with those browns and get your tans and get all the way to your dark umbers. And you can do that with what you're working with. Okay. So we covered a lot. So we're going to sign off from here. As always, may the Lord be with you. As always, take care. And next week, well, we may not be back next week, I know, because I am working on the Thomas Road Christmas Spectacular, and I'm doing the sets. You probably saw the sets that I showed you earlier in this video. It's an insurmountable amount of work. It's equivalent to working in Hollywood or New York, really, and it takes a lot. But I'll end up showing you those sets and what we're doing. So we may skip for next week and then come back again. Christmas is probably the most busiest time for me. But you have a lot to chew on right now. You have a lot to work with. So let's see what you can work with on these colors. And remember, keep working hard. And next week, we will be talking about how to neutralize these colors. Now remember, like, share, subscribe. This is going to help us build up, and we're going to be able to see a lot more happening. Take care. We'll see you next week.
Pantarabamba!